Welcome to Reach Minds, Thoughts for Your Life's Journey. Today, we'll be diving into the powerful and often overlooked question: what happens when life and work collide? Whether it's mental health struggles, caring responsibilities, burnout, or professional crises. These moments reveal how an organization truly shows up or falls short for their people. We'll be exploring the role of leadership, flexibility, culture in shaping compassionate, human centered responses. Now, research shows that up to 34% of salary cost can be lost to missed deadlines, absences, and turnover when support systems fail within organizations. And yet, how often do we see a gap between what companies say and what actually happens? So the companies often say our people are our greatest asset, and yet there's actually a gap between the words and the reality. So this episode is about how can we close that gap and imagine a more empathetic, compassionate world of work. And building on that, I'm joined today by Jay Jupp, a future of work strategist, leadership coach, and creator of the Inner Reach Growth Framework, a model designed for the moments when life and work collide. Jay began her career in pharmaceutical sales, where she mastered the art of meaningful conversation, earning top industry awards for both sales and coaching. With over 30 years of experience across the sector, she helps organizations lead with empathy, especially when work and life collide. As we mark our South Asian Heritage Month, Jay's story, growing up as a daughter of immigrant parents who champion education, offer a powerful reminder to all of us of what resilience, culture, and opportunities we can create. She's also a proud mom of 2 adult sons and has been married for 29 years. Welcome, Jay.
Oh, thank you, Nita. It's good to be here.
Now, from the perspective of organizations moving forward, how humane are workplaces becoming nowadays?
I think there's definitely movement in that space to the positive. So we are talking about empathy, well-being, flexibility. These are all things that are on the agenda, and some people do it better than others. I think, though, it still remains at surface level. And the real test comes, I think it really shows up when a life disruption happens, a bereavement, a burnout, caregiving, whatever it might be. And some organizations are doing really good, deep work, but some just rely on slogans and maybe the tick box. And maybe there's a reactive policy that's applied and it doesn't really fit, but it's applied anyway. So we need to shift from those good intentions to proper embedded good practice, I would say.
As you were just mentioning about some organizations who do the deep work, what would be some examples of that?
I think examples of deep work are where there's really good trust, psychological safety, where people are, managers in particular, are properly checking in on their people. And I'll talk a bit more about that later as well. And if people are feeling safe, if there's trust there, people will share what's going on. And then the right support can be applied rather than what policy says.
Great.
Policy shouldn't even feature in some of these conversations.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Building on that, in terms of the tick box,
Mm.
what are some of the unspoken expectations about how a personal life should or shouldn't impact our work?
Yeah, I think many people, I would say, expect us to keep work and life separate. life happens outside of work hours. And I think there's a really big pressure to be resilient, unaffected, just carry on, always available regardless. But life doesn't stick to work hours, does it? It's unpredictable, it's messy. I just mentioned now I've got a life work collide moment where my son's having a small operation on his head. He's fine, nothing to worry about. But part of my thinking is over there, what's going on? How is he? And we must stop equating professionalism. So I've just heard it this week as well, where we think you have to be professional all the time. And that means you have to hide what's going on for you in real life. I don't think that's really true. And being human and being professional can coexist. They're not opposites.
I agree with you because I think one of the things that organizations try to talk a lot about is about vulnerability. It's
Mm,
about saying, I'm professional and I'm also vulnerable at the same time
mm,
because I've got something occurring in my world that is impacting on what's happening around my work. And it seems like an empathetic thing to do for an organization to respond in a kind way to that.
And I don't think kindness is a bad thing. It shouldn't be looked on as being soft. Kindness is a human condition. It needs to be anyway. And it needs to happen in the workplace.
Yeah.
It needs to cross that divide.
How do organizational culture either support or hinder people during difficult times, do you think?
I think culture is a bit like air, if I use that analogy or metaphor. You can't always see it, but you can feel it. And in supportive cultures, people feel safe, they can speak up, they can ask for help. But in brittle or toxic cultures, people will hide their struggles and they will suffer silently. That's not great. And still be expected to perform, which is bonkers. And then the difference comes down to what's the leadership behavior in that space, in those key moments? Do they create space or do they avoid it to avoid the discomfort? And often it's their discomfort that they're trying to avoid because they don't know how to respond. Maybe they don't have all the answers. Maybe they feel they should, but they shouldn't have all the answers. Speak to the person, ask them what they need.
I think what you're saying is for a manager, from what I'm hearing from you, is
Mm,
to develop those emotional intelligent
yeah,
behaviors.
for
Ask,
sure.
be fearless and saying, I don't know the answer to this. However, tell me what it is you need. And maybe that is something that the softer skills that organizations I know are wanting to build, even though the emphasis are still very much on achieving results, being intelligent in terms cognitively, as opposed to emotionally.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also curious around that about the generational differences. Have you seen, how maybe Gen Zs now respond to when work and life collide? Is their responses the same as the baby boomers?
Now, I think the baby boomers are suck it up, get on with it, just do it, don't worry about it. Whereas I think Gen Zs are more likely to tell you that you're not meeting their needs and they don't suffer fools and they're not happy to just roll over. And sometimes baby boomers, we've learned to be, I don't know, resilient. And we think that we shouldn't share our vulnerability either. This is a two-way street, not just it's the leader's problem or the organization's problem or fault. We have to be brave enough sometimes to ask for help. We are not often akin to doing that. We have to sometimes tell people there's stuff going on and we don't like doing it.
Yeah, I think individuals where there's a lot of mush, which is what I call the emotional areas,
Yeah.
people go, oh my God, I don't want to go near it. So,
Yeah.
given that, how can organization develop empathy in their culture as an important element of how they manage people?
Anita, it's for me, it's a strategic skill. So what I think people think is that empathy is soft. It's not. It underpins emotional intelligence. And it's been proven that emotional intelligence is a key driver for team performance. right? So if businesses are worried about pounds, shillings, and pence, then empathy should absolutely feature and emotional intelligence should absolutely feature in everything that they do, how they lead, the environment they create. And empathy is part of what creates psychological safety. I want to be myself. I want to show up as myself without fear of judgment or punishment. And empathy is a key driver for that. And if I can show up as myself, I'm more likely to trust. I can let my defenses down. And we know it increases innovation and it not creates, but retains people because that's the environment that people want to be in.
How would you describe empathy in this context?
I think what people think empathy is that I have to have walked a mile in somebody else's shoes. We don't, not necessarily, because quite often we haven't. It's about getting a better understanding of what's going on for that person and being able to relate to that. Does that make sense? If I have something going on in my life, say I'm a caregiver, I've got elderly parents, they live with me, but that my manager doesn't. And in their own experience, they haven't walked that path. But asking me how it feels and what are some of the pressures and what's it like and stuff like that, that is empathy, I would say. Just listening sometimes and hearing my perspective about things is empathy.
Yeah, and I think what that speaks to me also is curiosity. That
Exactly.
you're curious enough to find out how my world is different from your world. And I completely agree. Empathy isn't about you walking in my shoes because we don't walk in each other's shoes.
Oh,
However, if you're curious and accepting, then we can begin to understand how someone else's world looks. I think it's quite tough for people to build an empathetic way of leading, do you think?
I think if you lead with the human being to human being, just interaction, that naturally comes. I would, having said that though, I would ask leaders to be very conscious about what they're doing. And then the other thing I'd add to that is reflection. So nobody gets it right all of the time. Okay. Sometimes you sense there's something off with the person that you are leading. And just to your point, if you are curious, that can just open up a conversation. I sense something's off. I just wanted to ask what's going on and how you are. That sometimes is all it takes. I think we sometimes make it extra complicated. I think we have to say this and we have to do this, but sometimes it's just, I sense something. What's going on? I'm here. I'm listening. That's it.
So, in a sense, it's quite simple, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, it's human to human, as you say, and it's not overcomplicated. And I guess it's also about the word that you used for me is the capacity to be reflecting. I'm
Yeah,
sensing something here. I wonder what's going on and catching that and just having that conversation with someone, as you're saying, maybe, I sense there's something off, not your work performance isn't up to scratch,
exactly.
which may be a very hard way of doing that.
Mm.
How do you think class, culture, gender, race affect or how they're supported when someone feels at
Mm.
work?
So we talked about psychological safety, and I would say that's not something that's evenly distributed. Okay. So you and I could both work in the same organization, even in the same team, but not feel the same amount of safety. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Actually,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly that. So people from ethnic minority backgrounds, we feel the pressure to work twice as hard, but we're likely to share half as much about what's going on. We don't feel like we can. Caregiving, for example, also, especially in Black and Asian communities with multi-generational households, that is quite a norm for our communities that they carry invisible loads. Working class employees may lack, like myself, may lack access to mentors or what's the insider knowledge. Sometimes you don't know what the etiquette is. You just don't have access to that. And then there was something else I read recently. I can't remember the exact source, but it was a Deloitte report that said 95% of women wouldn't share their life work challenges with their manager. Now, for me, that's a big red flag because they don't feel safe and they don't feel that they can trust whoever's managing them. And these, for me, these overlapping pressures affect how we feel safe, whether we feel safe enough to speak up and ask for help or not.
Yeah, I think there's a phrase that has popped into my mind. If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. I think used to be referred to when women wanted to progress within
Yeah.
organizations and if they were struggling. And it was often that label was often put on them. And I'm also hearing what you're saying. There's a multiple layers as well. You know,
Yeah,
you might
for
have
sure.
working class background with your race and ethnicity and your gender.
Yeah.
There's layers after layers, and you may feel confined to not to share what's going on in your world because the fear of being judged
Yeah.
or being interpreted as someone who can't do sort of the work that's been allocated to them. So it's a kind of sad
Mm.
indictment of organizations in many ways, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, Nita, we've been working this 9 to 5 factory model for way too long. And then COVID showed us what's possible. So there were many more human exchanges. Everybody could work how they wanted to, when they weren't wanted to, whether they were managing caregiving, children, pets. We seem to open up a world of possibilities. For me, from that, you can't go back. So it is possible. We had a glimmer
We,
of it.
yeah, we just have to find those kind of role models for ourselves.
Yeah.
So, what do you think an organization could do to support people when work and life collides?
Okay. So we have to build support into the system. Okay. Not just write policies. And for me, one of the key things, and we've talked about it, is really prioritize those high quality one-to-one conversations where the individual sets the agenda. So this is not about performance updates. These are about human check-ins. And the more we can encourage leaders to do that, more will come about. But here's the thing. Trust and psychological safety already need to be in place before a life work collide crisis, right? So
Absolutely.
so these things need to be built on way before, right from the beginning. And then how you respond, obviously, having created that environment. And then if those foundations aren't already there, support will only stay at a surface level and be performative. Whereas if we train managers to notice these subtle changes in behavior, be that energy tone, and then co-create the support that's based on real need, not assumptions, that's what I would do.
I guess you're leading into a little bit around my next question, which is if you were to design a workplace from scratch, and I guess you're creating that in your own organization, how would it better reflect the reality of people's lives?
We've talked before about the separation between life and work. I would design the workplace for real life, not just for productivity. So my examples of that would be flexibility should be default, not the exception. Life transitions should be built into the systems and policies. I know the UK labour laws are changing, which will give flexible working to new starters from day one. That is quite a powerful shift, but organisations also need to catch up with that. I also think that more recently I came across this information around life. There's a 3-stage life model, let's call it, where previously we would be educated, we would get a job, and then we would retire. And for me, that is outdated, a bit like the factory worker 9 to 5 model for knowledge workers, for service providers is not the same. We're living much longer lives. And life is much more multi-stage. So careers can be interrupted by caregiving, illness, reinvention, rearing children. There's a multitude of things that can happen. And careers now are not straight lines, they're wiggly and squiggly. So we should cater for that. And then everyone will face actually a life work collision eventually. And that's why inclusion and equity, and you alluded to that earlier, must be built into the design from the start, because life will impact everyone and the support that everyone will need will be different. Like I said to you before, you might feel safer than me to reveal something within an organization, depending on how you feel. And what you might need in terms of support will be different to me. And what we can be doing is asking people what they need rather than treating people as stereotypes. If you're in your 60s, you'll need this. And if you're a woman, you'll need this, by asking what people need and then offering that support. And sometimes all it is, I notice something's off. Tell me what's going on if you want to, and then how can I support? That costs nothing. Okay. And the other thing I think organizations forget is that life always comes first, as it should. But workplaces do fail to reflect that. And if workplaces don't catch up, I think they will be left behind by the people, their customers, and the communities that they're there to support and serve. So there's that. If you flip it though, organizations that do respond with empathy, flexibility, and the whole person build trust, they unlock potential, and they gain a lasting competitive edge for their people, for their customers, and for the communities.
So there's some real powerful benefits for
For sure,
people
yeah.
or for organizations to be more flexible, more creative, I
Yeah,
think, from what you're saying, and
yeah.
set some, not only things in their sort of design, and also in their practices as well. So it's not that it's just there in the system, that it's actually being practiced every day in the way that they manage their people, the conversations that they're having with their individuals, whether it's life is colliding or not. And they've got a handle on what's going on with the people within the organization, just rather than just focus on productivity, what they can bring.
Yeah.
Let's hope that, I think the shift from what you alluded to from COVID, despite its sort of impact, has
Mm,
really opened up the Pandora box around how we can all work rather than the 50s, in the 1950s, in a way that in a 9 to 5. So I think that has really opened up the box of options and choices that people and organization can have, which benefits both.
yeah, we've opened the box. We can't put everything back in again.
No, I agree with you. And I was having a conversation this morning with somebody in the park as I was walking the dog, and he's just retired. He worked for an organization. And I challenged him. I said, what does retirement really mean?
Yeah,
And because really you're beginning the next phase in your life. And the
absolutely.
concept of retirement, what we had 10 years ago, I think is quite different. And that mentality of perceiving that in that way is quite narrow. And then he shared with me the summers are fine. And he
Yeah,
said, what am I going to do
yeah.
when the winter comes? I said, be open to what comes through for you
Mm,
and see what emerges, because this is this is your life in a sense. He said, oh yeah, I'll give it some thought.
yeah,
So we
yeah.
do have to have a mind shift in many ways. And I think the last 5 years of our world has led to that in a very
Mm,
positive way, I think.
yeah.
Now, as we bring this to a close, what I'm always curious with my guest is, what's your motto in life?
Okay, my motto in life is the three H's: healthy, happy, human. And for me, it's more than a motto, it's a bit of a legacy. That's how you want to leave this world. I think. And when you look after yourself, everything shifts. How you live, how you love, how you lead, and how you show up. And when you honor your humanity, and we've been talking about that today, it's not just about your goals or your output, it's that you live more fully, you connect more deeply, and you grow stronger. So again, none of this is soft or fluffy. It just makes success, whatever that looks like for people, sustainable. And that's how we build, for me, lives, careers, and cultures and communities that truly last. So
It,
I'd leave you with healthy, happy human.
I like that actually. Healthy, happy human. I get the healthy and the human. The
Yes.
happiness, I might actually have a longer conversation with you on because,
Okay.
again, for me, there's often a difference between happiness and joy. And, it's my relationship with happiness is quite different from my relationship with joy
Yeah.
in that regard. But I love the three H's. I think they're amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your insight and your wisdom around how organizations, if they are to be relevant and to grow,
Yeah.
they have to pay more attention to the human asset as opposed to see them as widgets that they can generate productivity from.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. And it's been a real joy to share this space and talk about this stuff because it means so much to me.
If you're interested in working with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or www.nitasharma.com. And if you enjoyed the podcast, why not consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you have access to your podcast, and leave a review.